Great. Good morning to all of you who have joined us here today. Thank you so much and welcome. The Show Me Institute is really excited to be hosting EdChoice for this virtual event and for the unveiling of the brand new Friedman Index. For any of you who don't know, the Show Me Institute is an independent research and education organization based in St. Louis, Missouri. We focus on Missouri fiscal and economic policies from a free market lens. And we want Missouri to be a state that leads the nation in wealth, quality education, and a flourishing civil society. We have had the opportunity to work with EdChoice before and host them on our podcast. And they do amazing work at the national level on making sure that parents have as many options as possible when it comes to their child's education. And today we are being joined by two of their experts. First is Ben Scafidi, a professor of economics and director of the Educational Economics Center at Kennesaw State University in Georgia. He's a Friedman Fellow at EdChoice and a Senior Fellow with the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. Want to get this right? He currently serves on the Georgia Charter Schools Commission and previously held roles including Education Policy Advisor to Governor Sonny Perdue, Director of Education Policy for the Georgia Goals Scholarship Program, and expert witness for the state of Georgia in school funding litigation. He has a BA from the University of Notre Dame and a PhD from the University of Virginia. And Colyn Ritter, a senior research associate at EdChoice, where he researches school choice, public opinion, and K-12 education. He authors original research, analyzes polling data, and designs statewide and national surveys. His work has appeared in outlets including The 74, Real Clear Education, Fox News, and The Hill. Before joining EdChoice, Colyn taught ACT crash courses in the St. Louis area and worked with the School of Social Work at St. Louis University. He holds a bachelor's degree in accounting and sports business from St. Louis University, and we are so excited to have both of you here to tell us about this new project of yours. So I'll hand the mic over to you guys and let us know everything about the Friedman Index.
Thank you, Susan. It's an honor to be here with you, especially, and with the Show Me Institute. We've been fans of your work, Susan, for decades, and same with the Show Me Institute. Thanks for what you do. This is the 2025, and this is the first time we're doing the EdChoice Friedman Index. If you like the movie Moneyball, Colyn Ritter is the Peter Brand of the education choice movement. You'll see he's an amazing guy. And what we're trying to do here is for each state, including Missouri, how much private education choice do families in your state really have? All right. And the inspiration for this project comes from a bunch of places. You know, EdChoice is the legacy foundation of Milton and Rose Friedman, and the Friedmans believed that universal choice would greatly improve educational opportunities for children in grades K through 12. The great economist John Merrifield, one of the first people to analyze school choice programs, a couple of years ago, he created something called the Private School Access Index. Our index is a close sibling of his. And EdChoice as an organization, you know, when Colyn and I pitched this to their leaders about doing this, they were like, this is perfect. And we were like, why? And they said, we're coming up with a new tagline: all students, all options, all dollars. And you'll see our index dovetails with this perfectly. Last inspiration for this project: lots of states are passing bigger educational choice bills compared to the past, but they claim to be universal, but we're going to see if they really are. And so EdChoice staff, like Colyn and many others on his team, they have been painstakingly collecting data in real time, and they've created a repository of the details of each state's education choice programs. And these details really matter. The EdChoice Friedman Index is a state-level index. It ranges between 0 and 100 to measure how much private educational choice is available in your state. If you don't have a private choice program, you get a 0. And the minimum score we give for a state with a private school choice program is a 1. All right. So how do you get 100, a perfect EdChoice Friedman Index score in your state? All students, all dollars, all options. All students. Are all children eligible to participate in a private education choice program in your state? but this is Colyn harps on this, and this is very important. It's not enough to make students eligible for a choice program. Is there funding for all families who want their children to participate in exercise choice? So we call it funded universal eligibility. So if all children are eligible and there's funding for all families that want to exercise choice, then we'll give you a perfect score on all students. Next, number 2 is all dollars. So the average education savings account award to choice students has to be equal to the average of state plus local per pupil revenues in your public schools. So we're calling that all dollars, but put all dollars maybe with a grain of salt, because it really isn't all dollars. The way we're doing it, we're probably about 25% cheaper than district public schools for a few reasons. One, you see we're taking out federal dollars, right? State legislators and local policymakers have no say over federal dollars, and we don't want the federal government anywhere near these choice programs. So we're taking federal dollars out. So we're 10% cheaper there, right? Second is we're using the most current data available. And for public schools, data that's comparable across states is 3 years old. So we're comparing current ESA awards to choice students to 3-year-old state and local per pupil revenue in public schools. And as we all know, public schools are very good lobbying for themselves. They tend to get more money over time per student. And then the last thing is charter schools are included in the state and local per pupil revenue, and they tend to spend less than district public schools. So when we're going to give you a perfect all dollars score when we're about 25% cheaper than district public schools. And given their worldview, we think the Friedmans would be very happy with that. Last is all options. And we do up to a 5-point deduction from your score if you just give students vouchers or scholarships that can be used at private schools. We want all options. And Milton Friedman said this himself. And so we want education savings accounts or some other vehicle that is multi-use. They can use it to offset tuition at a private school, or you can use it to get tutoring or some kind of educational therapies or what have you outside of school walls. So all students, all dollars, all options. Here's how we calculate the score for your state. It's 100 times the percent of students eligible for choice. And again, this is funded eligibility times the average dollar amount per choice student divided by state and local revenues per public school student 3 years ago. And we do up to a 5-point deduction from that formula above if your state does not have some kind of multi-use program. All right. Colyn, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Ben. And I want to echo what you said earlier. Thank you to the Show Me Institute. Thank you to Susan. We're huge fans of your work. I've lived in Missouri for going on 7, 8 years now. I live in Kansas City, but I went to school in St. Louis. I'm a big fan of the state. And we're very honored to be here with you all today. So like Ben said, he went through the formula. He went through how, the 3 tiers of the Friedman Index, how we get a score. So here's a good example. Florida is the top score, just a sneak preview of the table that we'll show you soon. Florida is a 77. You can see here in the top left quadrant, their state and local revenues per public school student is roughly $11,000. Their average scholarship per student, per choice student. So Florida has 4 types of private school choice programs in their state. And given the distribution of all their programs and the students using them, their average scholarship per choice student is a little over 8,000. That's above average, as you can see later in the table. And lastly, they're funded eligible in the bottom left. Funded eligible, in the state for Florida students is 100%. If every Florida family wanted to participate in a private school choice program, there is funding to do so. And that's sort of the separator at the moment between states at the top and then states, who are middling or lower on the table, is the fact that there's funded eligibility for every student in the state. And for a state like Florida, with over 3 million students, that's big time. And so as you can see in the bottom right quadrant, dividing the average scholarship by the state and local revenues times 100 for their funded eligibility gives them a 77. We will go now to a more local example. Missouri is a 1, and their state and local revenues are a little above 13,000. The average scholarship per student in the tax credit ESA program that Missouri has is over 6,000, 6,375. The only issue, the biggest thing holding Missouri back is the funded eligibility. Only 1% of students are eligible for a scholarship. And Missouri is a relatively big state, so that is a decent number of students. It's tens of thousands, I believe, or a little over 10,000 students are participating. But this is how we get Missouri's score of a 1. And just using some of the, talking through a little bit more of the nuance before we get to the table. So Ben and I kind of went back and forth on this. We wanted to use the most recent data available, but that does not always line up. So for local revenues, for the financial aspect of this project, we use the most recent data available, but the issue is the most recent data available is fiscal year 2022, or 2021, 2022 academic year. And then, oftentimes, especially in states that are good about reporting the participation and the average scholarship amount for their choice programs, that most recent data could be, up to the quarter. Arizona, we can get ESA data as of January, February of 2025. So there is a little bit of a disconnect there, but we felt good about having the consistency of just if there's a recent data available, we're going to factor it in. And then lastly, you'll see if choice policies are in law and are being phased in, there's a couple examples with Alabama, with South Carolina, and their ESA programs will have universal eligibility by 2026 or 2027, depending on the statute. We give that state credit. Stacking is another thing. So in states with multiple programs like Arizona, like New Hampshire, Indiana is another one, where there are multiple programs and students might be able to use multiple. So for example, they can be a part of a voucher program or an ESA program and also be a part of the tax credit scholarship program in their state. We assume a stacking rate of 15% unless we have data to show otherwise. So New Hampshire is a state where we have good connections with the Children's Scholarship Fund who runs their choice programs, and they're very transparent and open with their data. And we know that 85% of the students in New Hampshire are stacking scholarships. And then lastly, just to kind of go over again what Ben said, we do give partial deductions for states with only partial participation in their ESAs. So Indiana is a good example here, where they have an ESA program for students with special needs, but that is the requirement to be able to use it. You have to have an IEP. And so roughly 20% of Indiana students are eligible. So we deduct 4 points instead of 5. For Missouri, actually, Missouri is ahead of the curve in having everyone eligible, or the program that they have being multi-use. So the tax credit ESA, Missouri is getting full points for that, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail there soon. And this is what most people come for. We initially did not want to have a table where the scores are it's sorted by the scores. We wanted it to be alphabetical because we don't want states to say, oh, Oklahoma or Wisconsin saying we should be better than Ohio. We should shoot for above a 32. No, we want to get as close to 100 as possible. So Florida, as you can see, is at the top, but they're all dollars at 77% being the only thing holding them back from an 100. And like I mentioned earlier, you'll notice at the top, 7 of the 8 top states have 100% in the all students category. And that is really the biggest hurdle to climb, in my opinion. Getting every student funded eligible in your state. And that is really kind of the driver here, because the all dollars, excuse me, the all dollars is a little bit harder to control. There's also a case to be made that the revenues in the bloated public school system might not be optimal for a choice program. So there's a little bit of debate there in terms of all dollars, but in terms of all students, getting funded eligibility for every student in the state really is a driver here. And as you can see, that's what's pushing those states to the top. Some surprises here on the right side in all options as well. You can see some of the Midwest states that have had choice for a long time now. Think about Wisconsin, think about Ohio, Indiana, where they've had robust choice for over a decade now. And the interesting thing is in the all options column, they've been using vouchers. Ohio, Wisconsin, they're not multi-use. Indiana, we have the asterisk because, like we said, there are ESAs for some students, but not all. And Milton Friedman actually was really ahead of his time in a lot of ways, but specifically here with the all options column, he says, why not add partial vouchers? Why not let parents spend part of a voucher for math in one place and for English and or science somewhere else? So that that kind of, that talks really to what we're seeing with ESAs, being able to use some of the money for tutoring, some of the money for textbooks or college credit courses. And, also in ESAs, you can, of course, use it for private school tuition. So we really want to give states credit for having a multi-use program, but, even states towards the top of the table aren't checking that box. So that's a good place to start. The next page of the table, you'll see some states that aren't quite ones. They have a little bit more, Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi all have multiple choice programs where, that all students column starts to creep up. You'll see in the all options, some of them have partial ESAs. A couple new debuts on the table. Idaho and Wyoming just recently this year passed their first choice bills and started off with a 2, which we really want to celebrate. We know it's unrealistic to expect a state to go from a 0 to a 77. It really starts with a 0 to a 1 and then a 1 to another jump. What that jump may be, is dependent on a lot of things, but we really want Ben and I really wanted to, there's a bunch of lessons from this, but one is that we want to celebrate states with seemingly low scores, a 1 or a 2, because we know how hard it is speaking to legislators and people who work behind the scenes to get these bills passed. It's incredibly tough, and we don't want states to feel bad about their score, especially if they're just kind of, dipping their toes into having choice in their state. So Idaho and Wyoming starting with a 2 is really commendable work, and we're excited to see where states like that go in the future. As you can see, especially Idaho and Wyoming, they have a yes in the all options column. We think that's a great start. Idaho, is getting 56% of the all dollars. That's not shabby at all. Utah is a good example as well here to point out in that their all dollars is the highest. If we were to sort this table by all dollars, they would be number 1. The only thing holding Utah back is that their funded eligibility is so low. Only about 10,000 students in the state of Utah can participate in their ESA program. And that's kind of one of the more glaring examples, as Ben talked about, is of a universal program that's not actually universal. So anyone is eligible to participate, but there's only funding. I shudder to say only $80 million, but in the choice landscape, only $80 million kind of makes, it makes sense to say that because there's only, with a scholarship size of 8,000, only 10,000 Utah students can participate. So they would be a real riser if that all students category changed for the better. And then the last page, you'll see the home state of Missouri here. Missouri is one of the tables, or one of the states I would point out in this table, is that they have a yes in the all options column. They're close to, you all are close to 50% in all dollars. It's really just the funded eligibility. But again, it's so much easier to go from a 30, 40, 50 starting at a 1 versus starting at a 0. So we really want to commend these states and give them, a pat on the back and say, this is a great starting place, but how can we go further? How can we get up to that first page of the table? And we hope that this table in general can help, guide and say, here's where we're lacking. Here's where we might be able to start. And also, here are some states where they do have 100 in all students. How did they do that? How can I connect with people in that state to learn more about it? So that's kind of the main utility of the table, we hope. But I'm going to pass it back to Ben here, so he can give a little bit more, context to this whole thing.
Yeah, so the virtue of the Friedman Index is it gives intuitive scores that range from 0 to 100. And it makes it easy for state policymakers and state level advocates like you to see exactly how you can provide more opportunities for your families, what you need to exactly do to boost your Friedman Index scores. Again, to be universal, it's not enough to say 100% of students are eligible. You need to have funding available for every family that wants their student to exercise private choice. And those average ESA awards need to be equal to the average of state and local funding in public schools. Again, it'll be about 25% less than what districts schools spend. Some potential concerns. We, in the report, are very generous to states with a Friedman Index score of 1. As Colyn said, we know firsthand from testifying in state capitals all around the country, just like you, we have arrows in our back and arrows in our front, right? In supporting school choice and education choice programs. We know how hard it is to go from 0 to 1. And you should be celebrated for being a 1. We're just trying to help you get to the next level, right? People love these indexes because they can see what it takes to move up the index. Another concern, as Colyn said, maybe choice advocates don't want a Friedman Index score of exactly 100, right? Maybe they don't want the very highest income families eligible, or maybe they think 25% cheaper is not cheap enough, right? So there's some concerns there. But providers or excluding private providers, we're going to do bigger deductions than the 5 points. And due to the concern about maybe you don't want to be literally at 100, maybe 85 is good enough, we're probably going to place states in bands. Like you're a platinum state, you're a gold state, silver state, bronze state, nothing state. And so that's how we're thinking about this evolving over time. But again, not only is your score important, but the components of your score are something you can show to legislators. And I'll turn it back to Colyn to show you what you can show legislators.
Thanks, Ben. And you cut out a little bit. I'm gonna come back to an important point about the second bullet here. So one thing that we've heard from people on the ground, and one thing that we're going to make a pretty immediate change to the index about, is all the options score. So we really wanted to establish a baseline. We wanted to keep it simple. So it was, multi-use programs. You get 5 points, or you get some, fraction of 5 points if you have such a thing in your state. But what we've heard and what we've realized is kind of, exactly what we should be monitoring, is that some states are placing restrictions or regulations on providers, on vendors, making it tougher for families to utilize the choice. In a couple of states, they've even shrunk the application window for families, taking it from 2 months to 1 month or something. And, that's something that is limiting the freedom of families in the state. And that could, potentially impact whether or not they're able to participate. So we are going to huddle sometime this summer or early fall, and we're going to really look and hone in on the regulation side of things when it comes to the providers or the vendors and how it's impacting families. And we envision upping all the options, score to 10 or something, and then deducting from there. So, there have been some examples in Utah and Arkansas where, they have a universal ESA and it's funded eligible. And so they're getting really great credit for those in Arkansas's case, not in Utah's case, but there are regulations and there are things that they're doing that are impacting families negatively. And so we're going to work with our policy team to, sort of nail down exactly how we want to dock states for that, and also give states credit for, very open, transparent, free of regulation ways to participate. So that's something we're excited about. But we really wanted to establish a baseline score here. And so that's what we're working with now, but eventually this will evolve to something a little bit more nuanced, especially in all the options column. So what remains to be done? We do have a map on the website under the PDF of the Friedman Index where you can look exactly at your state, and you can sort by different scores. So it's a little bit more interactive and customizable, and you can download the data as well. And then we also have an appendix online where you can see exactly what data we've used and sort of the sources for each state, how the scores were calculated. We really want to be as transparent as possible and also open up a communication line, as the last bullet point says, to please, we at EdChoice, we feel like we're pretty good at, capturing information sources and understanding where data comes from on these programs, but we're certainly not perfect. And as new programs come about, or, there's collapsing programs into one another in certain states, or just changes within the program, or more accurate data is released, we might not always be the first to see it. So please reach out to us if you feel that you've looked throughout the data and oh, there's something inaccurate or there's something more updated that we can include. Please feel free to reach out to Ben and I. We're happy to hop on a call or an email thread and kind of work on it, because we just want to be as transparent, as accurate and as accurate as possible. This is the table that I mentioned earlier. This is on our website, so you can see a little heat map here of the Friedman Index. Again, we don't want a state that is gray on the table to feel bad about themselves. We know how hard it is to start this type of motion, and that's a good place to jump off. It's really the states that are invisible and white that we really want to point to and say, here's states that could be doing more. That's an example of the table that's on our website. And then lastly, we really want this to be simple and timely. And so, when speaking with legislators or advocates, and, they're very busy people, and we might only have, 3 to 5 minutes to actually talk to them about their state's educational choice landscape. We developed these one-pagers where we hope it's, very intuitive and simple. Missouri's is right here, as you can see. The all students progress bar is, there's a lot of work to be done there, but the all options is completely full, and the all dollars is halfway full. And we include a little blurb on the right side, as you can see, just, a short paragraph on what can be done to raise its score. So again, transparent, simple, accurate. Those are our 3 goals here. And we really appreciate your time that you allowed us to present, and we would love to take any questions.
So I have a question for you, Colyn. I was a little surprised to see that the top 4, Alabama and Arkansas, are in there. You said that it's hard to start at even a 2, and yet those are pretty new programs, right? And they're top 4. Can you speak to why Alabama and Arkansas were able to just come out of the gate so strong?
Well, Alabama and Arkansas both had private educational choice programs before going to their big scores. Alabama is another one that I envision might actually be dropping, because we aren't totally sure. We're hearing conflicting information on the actual appropriation. We're not sure if that all students column is 100%. So Alabama is one that I do want to take with a grain of salt. Arkansas is a really good example where it is funded eligible for 100% of students. They had a tax credit scholarship and a voucher program for years, probably, I think it was 2020, 2021, maybe, when they started their programs. And the Succeed Scholarship Program, which was the voucher in Arkansas, had 5,000 to 10,000 kids on it already. And that was actually when they phased in their bill, because Arkansas did not just start out, it's called the LEARNS Act. It's an ESA program. It did not start as universally eligible. It was a phased in. So we're still, I think it is still in the 2nd year of their phase in, but we're giving them credit because next year, I believe, everyone will be funded eligible. But they started with their students that are on the Succeeds voucher program, as they get first priority, and then it kind of escalated from there. So Arkansas is a phase-in one where we're giving them credit. It's not there yet. I believe it's now 15,000 kids in Arkansas are using the program. That number could drastically change as the eligibility, changes alongside with it. So, you point out, you actually have a very good, feel for the table already, Susan. Arkansas and Alabama are ones where their score is a little bit of a projection where they will be because of the phase in. Arizona and Florida are the ones where it's like Florida, there's over 300,000 kids using programs where like a score of a 77 is completely justified. Arizona, there's nearly 100,000 kids using, there's over 100,000 kids using educational choice programs. That 59 is justified. Indiana is another one where it's, a serious portion of their, I think it's like 9% of Indiana students are on a choice program. So Alabama and Arkansas are ones that we project to be there. And, based on the law, they do have robust choice. Will the actual participation follow? That's to be seen. And that's a really interesting case in and of itself. But
That's kind of like
kind of a nuance of the table for sure.
a follow-up for me. And I know we have a question from somebody else listening, but have you considered putting number of students participating or percent of students participating on this table or somewhere on your table online so that it could maybe provide context? Because again, Arizona and Florida are going to jump off the table because they have hundreds of thousands. But I just wonder if that would be would provide perspective. And in that regard, do you know how much of the available funding in Missouri is being used? You have 1% of like 85% of kids are eligible in Missouri, but funding's very limited. So do you know how much of the available funding is being used?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll start with the Arkansas. We do have participation data everywhere, like the ABCs. We have it on our School Choice in America dashboard. Like if you want to see how many students are using it, we're pretty well updated by the minute. We have that on our website. The issue is with the Friedman Index, we want to stick to eligibility because take up rate, which is participating students divided by eligible students, it's not exactly what we want to do because we just want the option to be there for students. There are, plenty of times where like a homeschool family might not want to participate in the ESA, and we've heard it countless times in families from Arizona and Florida where it's like they just, they were doing fine without the program, and they don't want any sort of regulatory burden, if there is such a thing, in that state to impact their child's learning. So we want to stick to eligibility, but participation is an interesting one where, if the take up is really low in Arkansas when it becomes universal, that probably has something to do with a flaw in the implementation of the program, or there's too many regulatory burdens. So we envision that will register in the Friedman Index, but it'll probably register under all options because it will be impacting, like there are historical take-up rates that we'd imagine a state like Arkansas would start as and, maybe grow to. Florida's now at like 12 or 13% take-up in terms of the state. We want to make sure that we're, keeping it against, measuring it against the historical take-up of states. But we also want to be sure that there's not something impeding the take-up and making sure that parents are having a hard time, like whether it's a short application window or the implementation's going really poorly, or, the provider website, whether it's Class Wallet or Student First Technologies, whatever it is, they're struggling from the supply side, from their side. So that's something that Ben and I should just like, toss back and forth just to make sure that, we're not leaving anything unturned. And I appreciate you. That's the first time we've heard that, whether or not we should include something about take up. And my colleague Marty Lucan has done a ton of great work on take up rates, and we certainly have it. So that's a really thought-provoking one. And then in terms of Missouri, the funding allowed. So the last I've seen, and I was wrong on Missouri earlier. I said it was nearly 10,000 students. It's actually roughly 2,000 students using the program, at least in our last time we updated the program data, which is around last fall. I'm seeing nearly $12 million
I do think
being
it's
used.
higher now. And I will just point out with Missouri, in your defense, the data are very hard to find. They are not transparent. So
I
do
thought
think it's
so.
higher.
I thought so too, and we had a hard time finding Missouri data, and then it turns out it's so funny. Like there are some states where it's so easy to find data and they can, it's publicly reported to the minute every single, each year it's, around the same time and it's great. Or we can call someone in New Hampshire who can just like give it to us, at the drop of a hat. In other states, it's like, does the program even exist? I remember in Arkansas, their tax credit scholarship program, it had been running for 3 years, and we had emailed, we had knocked on every door we could. We had emailed people close to the program, and they didn't know how many students. Missouri's, it's funny. I actually went to the Treasury website and I did a contact us like anonymous, uh, like email type of thing where we just say like, hey, we're wondering about this program. And they responded incredibly quickly. So I'm seeing that the budget cap of the program is 75 million and it's about, at least in our most updated data, it's around 13 million is being used. So there's a ton of room to grow. It could be 10,000 or so students. The funded eligibility we have is nearly 12,000 students. So the take up in Missouri is rather low. But it's also a pretty new program. I don't think that there's been a ton of investment on the implementation side of the program. I'm not sure how many Missouri families are aware of the program. We're trying to do a lot of work on the awareness of programs in states. But I'd give it some time. Missouri is a relatively new program, and it just recently, I think, Susan, am I right? In the last several years, it bumped up the eligibility to like 85%. So
About a year. And also, all of the money is raised through tax credit donations. And so we have 6 scholarship organizations that fundraise the
yeah,
program right now. And we're hoping that the legislature will put 50 million in public funding behind it
yeah,
next week or so, which would be a bigger commitment. But I think you're right that momentum has grown around the tax credit donations, but it was kind of a slow start. And certainly if the ECCA federal program passes, it
yes,
might make that a little bit easier. But I I'm pretty sure that many of our scholarship organizations have waiting lists and we have parents who want to do it. It's
yeah,
not so much as it is limitations around fundraising. One last question, just
sure.
to put you on the spot
Yeah,
again.
please.
Have you considered what Texas's score would be? Where would they hit?
So Texas would be, we actually, Ben and I did this last week. We haven't added it to the table because, I actually don't know why we haven't added it to the table, but Texas would be a 2, and here's
Did the
why.
governor sign?
I think the governor signed.
I feel like no one knows. It's a day to day. Yeah.
I know Texas feels like Charlie Brown trying to kick the football.
Hey, the governor is going to sign it on Saturday.
Okay,
Okay.
This
that's
coming on
great.
Saturday. Yeah, so he hasn't signed it yet, but they made like
So
a big public announcement that they will Saturday.
So that's why we haven't put it on the table because we also just don't want to be the jinx. We don't want to jinx it and be the reason that they they
I
lose
get it.
that massive bill. So Texas would be a 2, and here's why. Their all dollars would be great. It would be, I believe, I don't have it in front of me. It would be like close to 70-80%. The issue with Texas is that the funded eligibility, the all students, kind of what plagues programs at the beginning. I don't want to make that sound super negative, but it's hard to start with 100% eligibility, funded eligibility. So Texas has $1 billion appropriation, which is massive, and it will almost certainly be the biggest, you know, initial bill in terms of appropriation that we've ever seen. But Texas has 5 million kids in the state. And so, with $1 billion appropriation divided by a roughly $10,000 scholarship, that means 100,000 kids in Texas, give or take, can start off using it. And, that's 1-2% of their population. So, um, you know, absolutely amazing place to start for Texas. And $1 billion appropriation is like mind-boggling, especially if you think about where people were 5 years ago thinking about this type of thing. But the truth is it's only 2% of their population. That's kind of hindering them from being at the top of this type of index.
So one last question, because I know we're going to end in 5 minutes, but
Sure.
we get to the all dollars, and Ben said that you guys use, maybe not the latest data, and it's discounted because it doesn't include federal and for several other reasons.
Yep.
So use this lower number. But in states with high participation, like your Floridas and Arizonas, does the total state spending on education increase, stay the same, or go down? I think I've seen something from the Common Sense Institute about Arizona, but what's your take on states with high participation in these programs or high on the Friedman Index?
Yeah.
What would you expect?
We've seen ample data that shows that it's a cost-effective measure to implement ESAs and robust choice policies, because what's happening and especially in like states like New York and other places where this expenditure of a student is, per public school student is like $25,000 to $30,000. It's bloated to the extreme. The expenditures per student in these choice programs, looking at Florida, Arizona, it's a third of that. Sometimes it's half of that. You can slice it in half, and also we've seen if Margot is willing to put the 123 link in our chat. The 123 show that participation in choice programs helps parent involvement, parent engagement, student satisfaction. There's ample evidence to show that there's positive attainment outcomes with participation choice. So not only in terms of like the qualitative, like parent satisfaction, things like that, but also in the cost-effective measures. It's going to take bravery to get there. It's a large number. It's new. It's a new thing. It's the public school system's been around for forever. A Texas $1 billion choice program is new, and it's scary, and it's a big number. But it's a worthy gamble, and also it's a winning public opinion narrative. Parents are supportive of it. Teachers are supportive of it. It's something that will take time, and there will be growing pains. Arizona is a perfect example. Think about the negative press they've received on their programs, and the misinformation towards that. But you also see really great outcomes in Arizona, especially on the newer frontier of education models like microschooling, hybrid homeschooling, things of that nature. So, we really hope that states like Florida and Arizona can be an inspiration to these type of states. But we also recognize that like this is new. It's going to take legislative bodies time and data to accept that this is a worthy investment. But everything that we have points to that it is.
And certainly these were never launched to save money, like saving money. Isn't the
Yeah.
goal of these, however, the return on investment that you mentioned, once you would get higher educational attainment and higher median earnings, your return on investment is much higher. So I think it's
Absolutely.
long term. It's hard for people to see. Well, Colyn, this was amazing. Thank you so much. We'll be following the Friedman Index. I saw Margot put up in the chat that you guys are going to update it routinely, which will be great. Our legislative session's ending, and we have a chance of moving to a 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
a $50 million increase would certainly help.
Would give us a bump maybe, but I really appreciate it. And so folks can go to edchoice.org and follow the links that Margot put in the chat, and reach out to you directly. I saw you put your email address on the last slide with any questions.
Yep. Please, I'll pull that up one more time. Yes, please do. And I also want to just say one more time, thank you all so much.
Yeah.
If you have any questions or comments or feedback on it, we'd love to hear it. We've gotten really great feedback just in the webinars like this in different states. So yeah, we thank you all so much. And this type of work wouldn't be possible without people like you all.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it, Colyn.